Hello lovely people, welcome to the 2024 edition of the Bauspielbahn-Treffen in Schkeuditz, Germany. The Bauspielbahn-Treffen, or BSBT for short, is a yearly meeting for LEGO train fans, where builders from all over the world bring their trains and layout modules together to create a gigantic LEGO train layout. In this video I'm going to be taking you on a tour of the layout and let you admire some of the amazing custom built LEGO trains that run on it. We start our tour at the heart of the layout, the double-level storage yard. On the upper level, a passenger train runs past on the runaround track, making its way towards the Wendelstein Station bridge. This bridge crosses over the lower main line and the entry track to the lower level of the storage yard. From the bridge, trains enter a wooded mountain section, eventually passing through a tunnel right under the peak of the Wendelstein mountain. From there, the track quickly starts to descend, using a large helix to get down to the lower level. At the bottom of the helix, we pass under the Beton signal box and enter Wendelstein Station. The difference in elevation is clearly visible here, with the Wendelstein Station bridge visible at the top of the shot. Leaving the station now, we pass through another forest section as trains continue to the rest of the main line.
No problem.
We're gonna take a small pause from the action on the main line and focus in on a section of narrow gauge that joins onto one of the standard gauge branch lines. We follow a small diesel loco as it's pulling out of Epfingen station. The train passes through a beautiful section of nature, occasionally interrupted by industry in the background. Eventually the train disappears behind the trees, heading towards Wernigerode. Part of this section is dual gauge, with the narrow gauge line sharing the tracks with the branch line from Donát station, until the two tracks diverge again at the Wernigerode yard. A narrow gauge train from Epfingen is waiting to enter the dual gauge section, but two standard gauge trains heading towards Donát are given priority. Once they've both cleared the section, the narrow gauge train proceeds towards Wernigerode. In the foreground, a standard gauge version of the same locomotive can be seen running around its train at Donát. A few minutes later, it emerges from the forest on the dual gauge line and pulls through Wernigerode. Slowly it continues its way through the rural landscape towards the main line. Aside from the long double-track main line, this year's layout had various branch lines of different lengths. This meant there was a lot to do for the smaller shunting locomotives that don't always have the speed capabilities to run the long-distance trains. Most of these were just running around for fun, but some were on a specific mission. Scattered across the layout were a total of 9 stations equipped with the so-called Train Cargo System, or TCS for short. This is a system developed by LBRICK that uses RFID tags and readers to simulate the movement of cargo. One of these TCS stations is here at the concrete factory. A small shunter is pushing one of the TCS equipped cars into the factory's loading track, and as the car enters the station, the dial on the control building shows that the car was fully loaded. The content is slowly unloaded from the car and transferred into one of the silos. Another one of the TCS stations is here at the scrapyard, situated on the main branch line just behind Donát station. So far I've mostly highlighted the western side of the layout, so let's now follow the main line past Münchberg and head further east. Our first stop is Swiss Lug Locomotive Works and Train Station. This junction is the start of another branch line towards Klein Altenburg and Pelleberg. But for now, we stick to the main line and head towards Roundville. Today, Roundville has only a modest train station, but the town has a rich railway history that's still celebrated today. The town square proudly displays a historic locomotive as its centerpiece. As dusk begins to fall on the first day of BSBT, the first train lights start to come on. After dinner, and now that the sun has fully set, it's time for some nighttime running. All of the main lights in the hall are turned off, only some blue mood lighting remains. Just enough so that the visitors can still find their way around. But for the most part, the only illumination comes from the tiny lights inside the trains and the buildings. The hall stays open for visitors until 10 o'clock on Sunday, so the nighttime experience is not just for the exhibitors. Quite a lot of the visitors stay until late to watch the lights. It really is an impressive sight to see.
Nee, kenne ich nicht. Aber wenn das funktioniert, dann kann ich stehen. Und ich muss jetzt darüber, wo der steht. Aber steht der da? But you know that this track is only this direction, yeah? Yeah.
Aber die hat kein Vorbild. Also wenn man eine...
At Gich Donát, a small shunter is busy moving around some coaches. The coaches from 2 different passenger trains that arrived at the station earlier that night are combined into one train, ready for an early morning departure.
I think the biggest thing will be traction, because it's small, it doesn't have a lot of weight, so you...
Actually 2 circuit tubes. Ich glaube, wir starten mal morgen den Livestream auf Wein-Account oder so. Die einen Rekord aufstellen. Ich werde nochmal Ja zu sagen.
We start off day 2 at the locomotive roundhouse at the eastern terminus of the layout. An East German class 58.30 steam locomotive is getting turned on the turntable, ready to pick up a consist of freight wagons from the yard. As another freight train drives past the Swisslok locomotive works, we leave the main line to explore the Klein Altenburg and Pelleberg branch line. Klein Altenburg is an impressive station, but unfortunately sees very little traffic. The branch line uses R40 curves and switches, and unfortunately most of the trains you see running at BSBT aren't built to handle curves that sharp. Some models can, however, and so we follow this diesel locomotive as it departs from Klein Altenburg towards Pelleberg. Pelleberg is a much more modest station, deep in the countryside with only a few houses surrounding it. The ideal place for a rally stage. Back at Klein Altenburg, an open freight wagon is being loaded with coal through the motorized crane. Back on the main line, we follow the tracks west over the elevated line above the city.
Also du hast dann bei Eck sehen. Da ist das natürlich ein Brief ganz schwierig. Und das geht klack, klack, klack.
So far we've only looked at trains on the large group layout, but there are also a few separate displays. These standalone models are usually larger scale, like Bahnhof Asendorf for example. This layout uses standard L-gauge track, but uses it for these awesome large-scale narrow-gauge trains. Even bigger is this amazing upscaled model of an early LEGO train set. And it runs too. I've highlighted the train cargo system already, but there are also some who prefer the analog way of playing with cargo, like this freight train full of kidney beans. Once the kidney bean wagons have been dropped off at the harbour switcher slowly pushes each car onto the motorized unloading ramp, where the contents of the wagons is unloaded into a barge.
Das ist Mühe.
Back at Wendelstein, we take the junction through the main storage yard and onto the main branch line. This first section of the branch line has two routes running parallel to each other. Initially we follow the southern branch, through the countryside and into a winter landscape. At the western end, a tourist excursion train has just turned right at the junction, turning back onto the northern branch. The train passes through Langenschwalbach and follows the northern branch back towards the main line. If we instead follow the southern branch further west, we pass by Schkeuditz station and eventually reach the small locomotive shed and turntable at the end of the line. Heading back east on the southern branch, we reach the town of Kotsko and its small station. If we follow the line further, we pass Wennikerode and head into the dual gauge part of the line again. The line terminates at Donát with a short freight extension to connect the line to the scrapyard just beyond the station. On the main line, a Vectron locomotive pulling a short freight train emerges from the branch line or the storage yard and heads east. Suddenly we find ourselves on the other side of the North Atlantic Ocean, in old-timey America. This layout sits all the way at the eastern end of the yard, and was the starting point for the steam locomotive parade on Sunday. Most of the steam locomotives that were present at the event headed out on a parade lap of the entire layout, an impressive sight to see.
Die ganzen Kabel, die da hingen, waren scheiße, wa? Ja, glaube ich. Oder auch nicht zu an der Seite. Stefan, du bist der Letzte, oder? Ich komme da hinter dich. Wir waren ja gerade noch eine Runde. Das wäre fies. Ich sag, der Tobi wird sich kämpfen.
We're nearly at the end of the weekend now, but we return briefly to Langenschwalbach station. A Baureihe 24, having just arrived at the station with its last passenger train of the day, is heading to the turntable. The locomotive is turned around and backed up into its parking spot, ready to get some rest after a long day. And with that, we've reached the end of the video. I want to thank everyone that attended the event for a great weekend, and I especially want to thank the BSBT team for all their hard work in organizing the event and also for sponsoring this video. This year they offered to pay some of my travel expenses in exchange for me making a video about the event. Without that I probably wouldn't have been able to attend this year, so thank you very much. Thanks for watching, please remember to like the video if you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you again soon.